morning, Andrea. Thank you for joining me for our conversation about BWP for International Women's Day. So, as you know, my name's Colette Byrne and I'm the Chief Exec of Broxtowe Women's Project, also known as BWP. So thank you for joining us, Andrea Lucy-Hirst, who set up BWP 20 years ago. So I wanted to just go through some questions with you and just talk to you about what BWP was like and just a bit more information about the landscape then and stuff like that. So we'll just get to it. So what was your vision for supporting those women experiencing or who had experienced domestic abuse when you set up BWP?
I think our vision was that women would actually have a local, accessible service. That was the main issue for women around Brentford, Eastwood, that area. And to provide a high quality service with a holistic approach. So that it wasn't just the issue, all the issues that are around domestic abuse and what other issues you may have, and to listen to the needs of individual women and try and use their experiences to develop other services if we could, we wanted to raise awareness of domestic abuse in a variety of ways in all the local communities, with leaflets, talks, toilet door stickers. We did all sorts of things. To be good employers and try and look after the staff. We wanted to obviously keep records, statistics, and interrogate them to see who we might be missing, because you just have to look, don't you, at your statistics around your population that you're serving and seeing whether you are actually reaching, in terms of age, etc. And to develop good partnership working. I mean, that was the key to providing a holistic approach. So housing services, Citizens Advice Bureau, drugs, alcohol, mental health, health services, etc., etc.
So your vision went across the board, didn't it? For
across the
board. We're going to be working with and what that would look like.
Yeah, and to provide a service that encouraged women to come forward by word of mouth, and for agencies to actually recommend the service to women. So it's about having a good reputation, providing something that women deserved and wanted, and that gave them what they needed, whatever that was.
Well, I mean, thankfully you did. Thankfully you did get there. So what was the landscape like for women 20 years ago in terms of what domestic abuse services they could access, if any?
In the area of Eastwood, Kimberley, Cossall, Alresworth, Stapleford, it was difficult. It was very difficult. The barriers were around going into Nottingham to find a service, to Nottingham Women's Aid. You had to go into town to get that service. Bus fares were high. If you had a family, finding the time to do it, to actually leave and go, was difficult for many women too. So we recognised that through the work that we were doing with women in Stapleford, Beeston, and Kimberley and Eastwood, and just listened to what people were saying. And domestic abuse was quite a topic in most of the sessions. So we were able to offer in Scarborough Walk Centre in Eastwood, there was a women's group, and they were able to offer a private telephone conversation, so they could telephone Nottingham Women's Aid. So that was good, and also workers in that centre would know how to access the refuge system if necessary, or people would be directed to social services again to try and find refuge.
What were the barriers to achieving your sort of domestic abuse support goals, and how do they differ to now, if at all?
The barriers. I think at the time, initially getting the first 3 years funding, it was a new project, so they can be quite attractive to funders. But on the other hand, you had to convince the funders that you're actually able, as a group, to carry out the project. So it's a bit like this. We had to establish the need for the project too. We had the support of Nottingham Women's Aid. We discussed our plans with them, and they were very much in favour of a new service to cover that area, because they knew that they weren't reaching people out there from their statistics. Midland Women's Aid supported the project too, and we were offering outreach, not developing a refuge. So the two things went together. We could offer the outreach, and they could offer the refuge. So that was good. It was complemented. Importantly, we had evidence from the women themselves. Both the cost of the bus fares and the distance were definite barriers for them getting support. The other one of the other things was we had to find a suitable base. It had to be local to the area, it had to be safe for workers, and it had to be a reasonable cost. I think the other barrier, or the barrier that has been consistent all along to achieve your goals, is consistent funding. Always.
Yeah. I don't know if that differs much now, but
no, I was going to say it doesn't differ any more now. I mean, we became in the first 3 years. We quickly became a registered charity, but not a charity, a charitable company at that time. That came a bit later. Yeah, I mean, 3 years, the first 3 years funding, and that 3 years goes very, very quickly, and you have to plan always for future funding. As soon as you see that timeline going, it's like, yeah, you've got to start putting those applications in, and that doesn't change. That doesn't change at all.
No, sadly not. You sort of touched on it before a bit about your level of engagement with partnerships, but at the time, how much did you depend on partnerships to fulfil the needs of the women that we were serving?
Once it was set up.
Once it was set up, yeah.
Yeah, lots.
Actually, getting it set up, setting it up, whatever got us to this glorious place now, Andrea.
I mean, partnership working was key, and it still is, because you want to provide a holistic service to women, then you've got to have other agencies that will support the drugs, drugs and alcohol, etc., etc. So even when the project was first established, small offers of a room in a library or a school or a clinic were actually essential to be able to meet women away from their home safely. So very small things, but we had begun to build those partnerships up from the very beginning, I guess. Then obviously the housing, having a good relationship with the housing teams, the Citizens Advice Bureau for help with money, and at that time legal advice as well. the drugs and alcohol service I've mentioned before, the mental health services, liaison with schools, children's services, adult care, children's services and social services. I happen to be based in the local social services area office. So I was able to pick up on quite a lot of conversations with workers in both the adult care team and the children's teams, and a lot of domestic abuse around workers' intervention with families. There's high levels of domestic abuse. So that, all that was evidence of why you needed another project, a local project, which was really good.
So from your partnership work, is that what sort of got you with the idea of having to set up Broxtowe Women's Project? Because the need, working with partners, told you that it was in the community, or is that what inspired you to begin that?
Part of that, but it was mainly the women in the women's groups, because you had the raw evidence of what was happening for the women. And yes, probation service, obviously the children's services, all that filtered in. The partnerships were important too. Yes, they were. Yeah. And then later on, Broxtowe Women's Project, they undertook, they do, and I think they still do, we undertook a lot of awareness training and awareness raising in the local communities. So with organisations, so that you had a whole fabric, so, even down to WIs and other women's groups and just normal community organisations that would have an awareness session, and CAB were trained. They had awareness sessions and training on how to, treat women. And then that was really, really important. It's about, if a woman is going to go and seek help, they have to have people who have some knowledge and had some training about looking at the attitudes towards women experiencing domestic abuse. And that's key. Otherwise, women won't go. People just won't go and access a service.
It's true to say that we're still doing that now with awareness raising and just trying to understand and get people to understand that it isn't just physical violence, that domestic abuse,
that's right,
financial abuse and everything has an impact. So what would you say has changed in the support available to women experiencing domestic abuse, or what stayed the same for them?
I think what's changed, certainly for the area that Broxtowe Women's Project has, I'm just, containing it there, because that's what I know or knew, was developing the ongoing support, when outreach was coming to a close, the freedom programs, the Freedom Plus programs, the wellbeing courses, the counselling service, which is, really tailored for women who've experienced abuse. The courts have developed specialist officers. JPs have been trained. The Maracks were set up. Police services had the domestic abuse officers. For example, midwifery services were one of the first services to actually develop a protocol to talk to women at different stages of their pregnancy. So they would talk to them, specifically try and check that people were safe 3 times in their when they saw them, which was excellent, and had a red flag system. Then there was the GPs training. That was a whole waft of national training for GPs that happened, but not only the GPs, all the people that worked in the surgeries as well, everybody.
And that, I think, made a significant difference, because I think at that time we found that the level of referrals from GPs actually went up after all that training. So it was effective. I mean, I think things are, training and awareness can be really effective. They really can be effective. So long as people feel that they have got enough knowledge and enough knowledge and know where to refer women and how to do that in a gentle way, offering it as a, then you get results. You do get results.
I guess the main difference from 20 years ago is social media, isn't it? Because our awareness is a lot through social media now, and particularly with COVID, that we've had to use that platform. Not everyone does, as we know. So, I think that's probably.
There's a lot more. There's a lot more knowledge-based work going on. The national research, the dispelling of myths of what domestic abuse is. Incorporating coercive control was made. That's absolutely brilliant as far as I'm concerned. And the definition of domestic abuse is much wider. And we've moved from the word victim to survivor, from violence to abuse, and that they're really significant moves over that period. There's more understanding. It's not just physical abuse, it's impact on children, and it not to be kept behind closed doors anymore. It is a community issue.
It is. And having those conversations, isn't it? Being able to be open, speaking about it, which is such a big thing. That I know, it doesn't even seem that long ago. It wasn't something people talked about. And I guess reducing stigma as well is important. I think for people to understand it's across all sectors of the community.
Absolutely.
Across all ages. What impact do you think that your work in setting up BWP and your volunteering across the past 18 years as a trustee have had for vulnerable women, and what would you hope is the legacy that you've left, Andrea?
Okay, before we go to that, could we just go back to what you feel has changed?
Yes.
And what stayed the same?
What do you feel has changed and what stayed the same?
I think the austerity measures that came in 2008, 2009 has actually had a detrimental impact on many community-based organisations. So quite a lot of the fabric that was around in Eastwood and Stapleford, etc., and Beeston itself, we've lost a lot of community-based organisations, a lot of them. And I think that's been a really detrimental thing to partnership working for women themselves and families. And it means there's less ability to give a wraparound package. I don't know what the drug services are like now, but they used to be community based in Eastwood. They would come out to Stapleford, but I'm not sure that they do that now. I don't know, and I haven't found out actually. But it's that ability for some of the community organisations to actually provide that service might have gone. But on the other hand, and it means that services like adult care, children's services, only now work to a very high intervention level, which means that the women that were coming through had far more complicated lives because there was not the support from children's services at a level when they should have been supporting them before it became too bad. So I think that has put an enormous amount of pressure on organisations like BWP.
So what do you, going back to that question.
All I was going to say was what has stayed the same.
Oh, yes.
What State saying was still a patriarchal society. And until it really radically changes, then the position of women will always be imbalanced in the home, in the workplace, and in society as a whole. And then there's a systemic structural racism and all the isms that impact on women's lives, that stop them getting the services that they deserve. Underfunding and sustainable funding is a constant issue.
Sadly, that's not going away either.
No, unfortunately. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. It's all good. So what impact do you think your work in setting up BWP and your volunteering in the past 18 years as a trustee has had for vulnerable women? And what would you hope is the legacy of all of your efforts and work, Andrea?
Okay, I mean, I think the original group, Broxtowe Women's Issues Network, I mean, we set out with modest aims, we did. But it's sort of grown, and one of the things I have to thank Nottinghamshire County Council, my managers, was that part of my time up until 2008, I was a paid community development worker, but I had managers with the foresight that saw that organisations needed support on a longer term basis. It wasn't just about setting them up, here's the money and go. They were, they knew that some organisations, or a lot of organisations, needed that longer term support, which was good. Then in 2008, I retired and I volunteered. But, I just have to say, I'm just one person among the many who have supported Broxtowe Women's Project. I'm just one person. But I think Broxtowe Women's Project have had excellent workers who took the organisation forward. They had some really good trustees, and that wasn't not myself. I was a reasonable trustee, but I wasn't an expert trustee, if you see what I mean. I'm a generalist. And we moved from a charitable status to a charitable company, and lots of time spent with one particular worker and a couple of particular trustees to actually do all the due diligence to keep the organisation up to date and make sure the project was fulfilling all its commitments to both the women, to the staff. And it made it a much stronger organisation to meet the challenges that it's had to face and will face in the future. I think I would like to say, or want to say, that Broxtowe Women's Project have supported women in the ways that women have wanted, have actively listened and helped women to make their own decisions, that women and women with children have been kept safe, that BWP listened and recorded women's thoughts about the service that they had or were receiving. I think we had excellent processes of knowing how women had progressed and made the changes that they wanted and were moving on with their lives. We also reassured women that they could finish outreach at any point and they could always come back to the service when they were ready or wanted to. Some women were supported by phone, and that was their choice, and that could change at any time. If they wanted outreach face-to-face, that was fine. They could change. I think the outreach that we offered, and I assume still offer, is flexible, wrapped around the needs for women. I'd like to say that Broxtowe Women's Project tried to grow its services to include the helpline, supporting children, access to legal surgeries, the telephone support service, access to counselling sessions, the freedom programmes, the follow-on programmes, the awareness raising, the partnership working, the networking with agencies, all to make a difference for women surviving domestic abuse in the best way possible. And one of the best tests was how many women self-referred to BWP. In places like Eastwood and Stapleford, word would pass around from woman to woman. And if a woman had a good service, then she would let other women know. So that was always a good test.
That's still the case, I'm very pleased to say.
It's the best test, actually. I think the Women's Project have always honoured the grants that they've received and worked hard at producing the outcomes that have been agreed. And I think that's really important. Always providing reports on time, annual or quarterly. And it's important to demonstrate that Broxtowe Women's Project is a robust in its delivery and outcomes. And if funders see that, it was more likely they could be approached again to try and provide a continued service for women. I mean, what has been good over the years, whenever I've been involved with White Ribbon campaign, you know, with stalls outside supermarkets and raising funds at some local community event or carnival or whatever, there's always been women who come to the stall and would just say very quietly that had been supported by Broxtowe Women's Project in the past and how pleased they had been with their worker. And that was always really satisfying, because you actually, you know, it might have been years after, but women still remembered. And I think that's very, you know, a really good
legacy, isn't it? To know that there's thousands of women that you and obviously all the other workers and trustees over the years have managed to make a difference to thousands of women's lives and their children. That's a great legacy to have. So this is a bit of a question for you, Andrea. So what would you like to see in the next 20 years or the next phase for BWP?
I'd love it to be sustainable. I'd love it to grow in ways that it might need to, with all the changing technology and all the changes that are happening, the issues of COVID, you know, and there may be other challenges, similar challenges that will come along. And to have enough funding to be able to do those things. And funding, I think, is important to be able to allocate enough worker time to be able to spend with each individual woman. I think that's really important, so that workers aren't under too much pressure, and women get a good allocation of time, because I think that's what's needed. Women need to be listened to. Women don't always, it takes time for a woman to think about what's happening, for a worker to listen, to put in suggestions or how you might think about this, and that's not done in one visit at all. It's about building up relationships and trust. I think I'd like to see government to recognise the full cost of domestic abuse, because it is a huge cost when you think about it, with health, mental health services, you know, a whole range of the courts, etc., etc. And try and ring fence budgets, and indeed increase budgets, to provide all domestic abuse agencies, whether it's refuge or outreach, with sustainable funding. That's what I'd like to see.
I would like to see that too, Andrea. I would very much like to see that too. And I think that there are elements and pockets of that. You know, the police have just released something which is COVID related, just specifically for domestic and sexual abuse.
Yeah.
So they do recognise it in a obviously in a smaller way, and you know, restraints of budgets. Hopefully, we can work towards having something sustainable. I do hope so. And I just wondered, Andrea, what you think makes BWP special?
I think it's the dedication of its staff and trustees to offer the best service it can to women.
We really pride ourselves on quality, don't we? You know, trying to give that long time support post-crisis.
Yep.
Yeah.
Not just I'm working with you for 6 weeks and then I'm leaving you. It's seeing things through, and I think that's really, really important. I think the organisation, it's small, and small can be good. I think small can be beautiful, actually. Some people would consider it's too small for a CEO, but actually over the years, thanks to the persistence of a very wise original worker, you have to have a distinct separation between the workers who deliver the service and the management, maintenance, development, the funding reports and maintaining partnerships. You have to have a separation, and you have to have a role that does that. It's local to the area. And for me, I've always believed, well, I'm a community worker, so I would always believe that local services are far more accessible to people, whatever that service is.
I agree.
And I think the organisation is rooted in the area it serves. It knows its area. It knows how it changes. It knows what changes are going on, what's happening. And I think that's so important.
Yeah. So for me, coming in as a new chief exec, or the first chief exec, I've been really impressed by the feedback I've had from partners about how well respected BWP's workers are. You know, our teams that go out in the community, the partnership that we do, the outreach that we have, and the feedback from our women. And it's just, you know, I'm very proud and very honoured to have been selected as the chief exec for this small charity, because there's so many small charities like us that are doing that community work that is absolutely essential, that sort of goes under the radar, but as you know, makes the impact in the community. So I wanted to say to you, Andrea, thank you so much for setting up BWP, because I wouldn't be here if you didn't. All of the women that have benefited, and there are thousands of them over the 20 years,
Yeah.
You know, improving their lives, giving them a chance for independence and resilience and everything else that we work so hard to. So I wanted to thank you for setting up BWP and your hard work as a trustee, and all the other trustees and workers over our 20 years. So thank you for your time, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you for the interview. And could I just say, I've set myself a challenge. I'm going to pursue our local MP over the domestic violence bills and see what he's doing.
I just wanted to say a huge thanks for obviously your insight to set that up, and for supporting the women at the time and for now. And just a real big thank you for your work as a trustee for 18 years. And I know that you're still supporting us, even though you're not a trustee, you're still very much involved with the women's agenda and BWP. And also a massive thank you to all the trustees and volunteers and staff over that time. So thank you very much for that, Andrea.
Thank you, Colette. And I just want to say that I was just one individual that was involved all the way through, and that was a privilege. And I'd like to thank everybody that was involved, the workers, the trustees and the women. Yeah, a big thank you to them. I'm just one voice. That's it.
What a great voice, but thank you.